For most Hindus, praising and loving God at every moment, with every breath, creating poetry for the God in praise and loving adoration, all this might be a high task, a little bit of an ideal beyond what the everyday Hindu can do. Yet he or she will take on something of the Bhakti path by doing regular puja. And puja is defined as reverence, honor, homage, adoration, or worship of one's chosen deity. So what it entails is worship of a deity at home and or in public, sometimes on the roadside, at a river, a tree, as we looked at. Puja, in essence, is taking time out of one's day or out of one's week to show love and affection for one's chosen deity. Puja rituals are also often performed for rites of passage, as we saw previously. Holidays and festivals have many elements of puja. It's performed to ask for a blessing, sometimes material, sometimes spiritual blessing, to appease a god in times of trouble. Or maybe things are going wrong in one's personal or one's village or society's collective life because the gods aren't properly being honored. So it's time to appease them, to create peace and harmony, either in one's individual or collective life, and to strengthen community ties. All or at least most kinds of religious rituals are done in community and strengthen community ties. So what is actually done is the lighting of oil or ghee lamps. This is often called arati, and the light itself, honoring the deity with light, is pleasing to the deity. And it's also seen that the light and the smoke from the light purifies all that is offered to the deity, as well as the person offering it, and perhaps the deity itself from all negative or evil influences. So it's kind of a spiritual baptism that happens. Also, the light itself that is offered and given to the deity will be received back to the offerer. This light is not only received by the deity, but given back to the worshiper, and one becomes illumined with the light of the deity, this very arati. Puja often includes the offering of flowers, rose water, sometimes pouring rose water over a statue of the deity, as well as the offering of the burning and offering of incense for the deity. One will offer sacrificed food called prasad. This is often fruits, nuts, different forms of sweets, and even though the deity doesn't really consume the actual food, to understand he or she partakes of the essence or core of the food, as well as the spirit in which it's offered in. Prayers are often in praise of the deity, often supplicating the deity for a blessing as well. And one will greet the deity and prostrate oneself before the deity in this puja worship. So a kind of hello, and I honor you and I bow before you. The deity is often washed and or clothed in a puja ritual as well. And be sure to watch some of these videos that show different ways that puja is offered by various Hindus, both at home and or in public. So puja overlaps closely with bhakti as a kind of bhakti practice for the everyday person. Other bhakti practices might be the recitation of the name of a god or goddess. It's often called mantras, in which same name or phrase in praise of the god as an attribute or quality or perfection of the god or goddess is recited over and over again to really immerse and enmesh oneself in understanding and intimate communion with that quality or characteristic of one's personal god or goddess. One will sing or recite praises of the deva or devi, devi being feminine form for deva. And these songs of praises of one's god or goddess are often called bhajans. Some of them can be fairly short, but many of them go on and on for many, many minutes, sometimes even hours. Attending different festivals in honor of a god or goddess, or sometimes a set of god or goddesses, may be part of a bhakti practice, as well as so also for a puja practice, and you'll be able to see a festival for Ganesh or Lord Ganesha through the link. Sharing the company of fellow devotees, so sharing that spirit of people who are also devoted to one's favorite god or goddess may be a way of bhakti, and to generate more excitement, enthusiasm, and love and appreciation and knowledge of one's own god or goddess, as the devotees will often, through their own devotion, take on attributes and characteristics of that god or goddess. So in a way, one can get to know that god or goddess, or at least that's how it's understood, through that fellowship with fellow devotees. Now, within interpretations of Hinduism by Hindu scholars and priests, as well as by outsiders who try to organize and articulate what Hindu beliefs are, it has been presented that there's a kind of Hindu Trinity in which there's these three sets of gods who represent the primary acts of generation, sustaining, and destroying and renewing of the cosmos, of the universe, of the world itself. Now, Brahma is considered this creator god, Vishnu the sustainer god, and Shiva the destroyer god. However, although in scholarly articulation of Hinduism this is used by Hindus and non-Hindus, we have to be careful, because Brahma himself is not in everyday practice very popular at all. He appears in some stories and mythologies, both in Hinduism, as well as he makes an appearance in the story of the Buddha as well. But there's only one or a few temples in the thousands and thousands of temples within India devoted to Brahma himself. So he's been lost and forgotten about among everyday locals and temples themselves. Now, a more apt, when we're thinking about the everyday practices of Hindus and what beliefs, what gods or goddesses are most important, a more apt or appropriate Trinity, if we want to do the Trinity thing of saying, okay, these three forms of the god are most prevalent. That is the god Vishnu, the god Shiva, as well as the Devi or Shakti. So this isn't any particular goddess, but is the goddess in all her manifestations. And the goddess gets a ton of worship and veneration within India, although in various forms and various manifestations, various faces of this one and same feminine principle, a feminine divine principle called Devi or Shakti. Devi Shakti is also the feminine energy of the gods themselves. So gods are seen as very passive and can't do much on their own. What makes them active, which makes them powerful, is the accompaniment of the feminine divine energies, and this is often embodied through their consorts or wives that frequently they're depicted as being with. They can only be effective through this accompanying divine feminine energy. Now, another way that this idea of this Trinity in which only or this particular God is responsible for this thing is that for Hindus, often the god or goddess that you worship is responsible for or has the power to do all those things, not just one of those things. So this is called the 5 functions of all deities, in which whether you're venerating the Devi or goddess, whether you're venerating Shiva or venerating Vishnu, all of them, not just Brahma, but all of them have the power and ability and function to create. All of them sustain or maintain the world and the universe. All of them destroy and renew the world, the universe. All of them can be supplicated, beseeched, entreated, and asked for a grace, some sort of boon, some sort of blessing. And all of them can grant those blessings or boons or favors, both material and intellectual and spiritual. And all of them, this is interesting, all of them veil reality as well. The thought might be that seeing reality in its full splendor and its full majesty and might be so complex, so majestic, so overwhelming that they cast a kind of veil to keep us from seeing it fully, but only as we spiritually develop and gain capacity to see spiritual reality as it truly is this veil lifted in our lives. And so it's kind of a blessing, not an act of punishment or trickery per se, that the reality as it is might be veiled to a degree by the deities. So the question comes whether Hinduism is monotheism or polytheism or something else. And really all of these types of theism are apt or appropriate to describe Hindus. So often devotees of one expression of the universal God, often it's called Ishtadeva, while honoring other expressions as also valid. So this means that one sees, well, if you devote your worship to Shiva, you might see Shiva as the universal God who's responsible for all 5 functions, does everything a God or supreme being is supposed to, and is thus the supreme being himself. But at the same time, one will honor other people's expressions, those that venerate Vishnu or those that venerate an expression of the Devi or Shakti energy in one of its forms. These are also valid, and this kind of idea is often called henotheism, where you have one devotion to one god or goddess, but you recognize other people's devotions as also valid. One might also practice scathenotheism, so this is worshiping one god at a time. You go at this moment, this time, to one god or goddess who, even though all of them in a way can do everything, you see this one as being more characteristic of having the ability to help with this thing or that thing. And so you go to Ganesha, for example, when you want to do well in a test, or you want to do well in business, You might say a prayer to Lakshmi, the goddess, who is seen as a goddess of wealth. And the image, or which is often called murti, it's an important word, the image of the god or goddess, sometimes as a picture, a painting, a drawing, often a statue. The image, at least ideally, is not supposed to be confused with the deity, his or herself, who is a spiritual supreme being of the universe and is present with and through the vehicle of the image, but is not literally the image or statue, his or herself.